What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Well, as you just saw, I have some clutches soaking, and the reason I have them soaking is because that's what we're going to be working on in today's video. As you saw in the last video, my clutch adjuster went out on my Sportster, and because I had to get so far into the primary in order to replace the adjuster, I decided to go ahead and replace the clutches since I'm that close to it. I've never replaced the clutches, and I don't really know how long these clutches have been in there, and it just, kind of peace of mind type deal. It's one of those that I had been talking with Harley Davidson and actually using the OEM clutch part numbers right up here and the steel ring and also the spring ring. I added them all up with Harley Davidson. It was going to be around $400, $450. He said, you can do that, but how about you go with the upgraded kit, and it includes all of it as one kit, and that is going to be this part number right there, and that's the Screamin Eagle kit. And as y'all well know, a lot of the Screamin Eagle is your upgrade from OEM factory. And, I didn't have a problem with that because, like I said, it's OEM factory upgrade parts, and I know that Harley Davidson had signed off on that, and I was kind of afraid to go with some of these other brands, and the reason being is that you may have some brands that may not include as many clutches, or they may say, well, we don't have as many clutches because it kind of helps make the clutch a little softer, a little easier, and I kind of disagree with that. And this is going to be one of the times that I kind of agree with engineers when they say you need X amount for it to work correctly. And that's kind of what Screamin Eagle did. They kind of, with their engineers, said, okay, we're going to take out the amount of we're going to take out the spring ring, but we're going to also add a extra clutch and steel ring to replace that, and so the spacing on your clutch basket is going to be the same. Like I said, I've kind of already tore off the primary. I kind of wanted to redo this intro after talking with Harley and stuff like that. So let me go back and kind of show you some of the things as far as the special tool that you're going to need in order to take your primary or your clutches apart and everything. And then we're going to go into the actual taking the clutches and everything out. And then you'll kind of catch back up with where we are right now with the clutches soaking. So this tool right here is a clutch spring compression tool, and as you can see right there, it actually works from all 91 to 02 1200s, all mdoels from 95 to 01, and it fits most bigger twin Evos. And so this is a very handy tool to have if you're going to be working on a clutch, because so several times whenever you're looking at the book, going through the procedure, it tells you to make sure that you have that tool or the Harley Davidson equivalent already before you try to go ahead and tackle this, because the actual retaining spring that is holding your clutch pack and everything in is very tight. And so it's one of those that without this tool, you're not going to be able to get the circlip out in order to get your clutches out. So let me kind of show you a little bit more of this tool. So you have the part that kind of goes against your clutch basket to kind of compress the spring. And you got a handle right here that's going to be threaded onto one of these two right here, depending on which one you have. And what it was saying is that this one right here that is hollow is actually going to be for a Sportster, where this one right here is actually going to be for a Big Twin. And so this is one that we're going to be using. So let me show you the actual clutch adjustment and what it looks like right now. So in order for me to show you the actual clutch adjustment, I'm going to have to take this inspection cover off. And these are going to be T25 Torx bits. And you got 4 of them all on, kind of in a star pattern. Because I've already had this inspection cover off once, kind of looking at stuff, I've already drained some of this fluid out. But you're going to want to make sure that you have a drain pan underneath it before you take your inspection cover off. Otherwise, you're going to have fluid start flowing out. So behind your inspection cover, you have a little gasket that kind of seals everything right there. And then you have a spring with a lock that kind of locks your spring adjustment from turning while you're going down the road. So you don't want to lose this at all. So as you can see, my clutch adjustment has a lot of slack in it. Saddle Tramp tightened this up a couple of days ago, and before we got done riding, I actually completely lost my clutch, and it's loose again. So I know that there's actually something going on inside here. Saddle Tramp knows that at least my clutch adjustment's gone out, and so I don't know what else I'm going to find once I get the cover off. But the first thing I need to do is go ahead and drain the rest of the fluid. In order to do that, you have your drain plug right down there on the very bottom. So that's going to be a 3/4 that we need to loosen up in order to get the rest of the fluid out. And once again, make sure you have your drain plug underneath where the fluid's coming out. And you can see right there on the bottom of the plug where the magnet is, I do have some material that come out. So who knows what else I may find. I do have a good feeling that my clutches may be ready to replace. You saw I had it on the side stand, but you may also kind of hold it up so that you can actually drain more of the fluid out. Now that we have most of the fluid out, put your drain plug back in so you're not making quite a mess while you're getting some of the other stuff off. As you can see, I have the motorcycle up on a motorcycle jack, but I'm not going to say you can't do all of this without a motorcycle jack or some way to get the motorcycle up off the ground. I don't really know because, like I said, this is my first time doing this, but the next thing you need to do is I'm running forward controls, so part of this I don't have to worry about. But if you're running mid controls, you're going to need to take your footrest off that is bolted on, I believe, right here. Then you're going to need to take your actual gear shifter off right here because we're going to have to pull the primary. So let's get this gear shifter off. Before we actually remove our shift lever, we need to actually mark our relationship from our spline right here to the shifter. That way we can put this back in the same location and not have to kind of play with it to get it back where it was. So get you a permanent marker or something and make a mark just like that, and now we can actually remove our pinch bolt. And this pinch bolt is actually going to be a 3/16 Allen that you need to remove. And I know that several of these shifters like this actually have a groove inside here where the bolt goes through to help keep it from going in and out. So you're going to need to remove the screw all the way. So you can try to maneuver this out without using a screwdriver, but a lot of times you have to use a screwdriver to kind of press these back apart a little bit in order for you to get your shifter all the way off. So the groove right there is where I was talking about that the bolt kind of goes through to kind of help keep your shift lever onto your shifter. Now that we have our shifter off, let's start working on our clutch cable. And the first thing we're going to do in order to get our clutch release mechanism out is we're going to loosen or add more length to our clutch. And so put your clutch adjustment and turn it clockwise, which will run this bolt in and pull the nut out, like you'll see here in just a second. So you're going to want to get a real thin screwdriver that will fit in your groove, and we're going to turn that adjustment clockwise. And like I said, what it's doing is it's running the bolt in and pulling our nut out. Once you get to a certain point, it should come all the way out, and you're going to have to hold it while you're continuing to turn it clockwise. All right, once we get it off, just set it aside. All right, and so we're going to kind of pull it out a little bit and be careful to kind of hold it together because you have some ball bearings in there. And then we'll flip it over and you can see what is holding our clutch cable to our actual clutch release. And so we'll kind of turn it a little bit and just slide it down, and now we can remove our clutch cable. We'll have to kind of push this up a little bit and remove the rest of it, and now we should be able to just loosen this up and pull our clutch cable out. All right, so with a 9/16, just loosen this up. All right, once you have it all the way loose, kind of reach in there with your finger and kind of follow the ferrule out so that it will come out of this hole right there. The last thing we need to do in order to remove our primary cover is we're going to need to loosen our primary chain. Now down here on the bottom of your primary cover is where the chain adjuster is, and in order to do that you're going to need to loosen your jam nut, and this jam nut is going to be a 7/8. And as you can see, I'm using a socket to loosen it up. And it's loosening up as one unit, which is fine because we'll adjust it correctly once we get it done. So on your primary cover, you have 11 Allens that are going to be a 3/16. You got one right down here, you got one right there, one right there, the two up here, the one right there, right here, right here, one down here on the bottom. And then you got two Allens right here that are going to be 1/4 inch on mine because, like I said earlier, I'm running forward controls. But if you're running mid controls, these two Allens right here are probably already out. So on your 3/16 bolts, once I got the second one out, I wanted to make sure that I didn't have different sizes, and I actually do. So once I get all of them out, I'll go over where the sizes are depending on which location they go. All right, so starting down here on the bottom, you have a short one, then you have a long one, and then another short, 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 and then you have these two right here that are going to be long ones, and then you have a short one, and then you have another long one right here, followed by the last one being a short one. So here are, right here, kind of a comparison of how much longer and shorter the two are. All right, now that I have the last bolt out, I should be able to just kind of barely pull it and it should come loose. So in order to not get them mixed up, I'm going to go ahead and put the bolts back in the order that I took them out so that I don't get them confused as far as the long and short ones. As far as our tool is concerned, what we're going to do is I'm going to get a little bit of the primary fluid and I'm going to spread it onto our clutch adjustment screw, and then I'm going to put our actual tool, the bolt portion of our tool, the inside of it is actually threaded, and I'm going to thread it onto our adjuster. And you're going to turn it clockwise, and you're going to run it all the way down against the housing of our clutch adjuster. And you may need a long flathead that'll reach in there to kind of hold it. Once you have that, get your clutch tool housing, and you're going to push it all the way through it, and then get your handle and run it into against the housing. As far as my actual bolt right here, this little portion right here is actually a 9/16. So with the 9/16, I'm going to put it on there and I'm going to hold it, and then I'm going to turn our handle, and it's going to compress all this in so we can get our circlip out. All right, now that I have our spring compressed in, you can kind of see how much slack I have now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of hold the tool up, and right there is your circlip, okay? And you can kind of somewhat move it a little bit. Just, you can kind of see how it just moved. Underneath this circlip is actually kind of a bearing, and I just pushed it in a little bit. And what I'm going to have to do with two hands is I'm going to have to kind of have that pushed up and have that bearing kind of pushed back, and then I'm going to have to pull down and pull the circlip out. So I'm going to need two hands in order to do that. All right, like I said, I'm kind of holding the tool up or pushed in, and then I'm going to push the bearing behind it, and then as I pull down, I'm going to try to pull it out just like that. And then I'm going to have to work it around as I go. Kind of holding the pressure against our spring. All right. Now that I got that, I'm going to kind of ease it back, and then there's our clutches. So that right there is the circlip that I was talking about, and then you can see right there is what they call a spring seat, and that's what I was pushing in order to get our circlip out. All right, so in order to really look at this bearing right here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this off of our tool, and it's one of those that the book recommends not taking this apart, but like I said, I need to do further inspection on this actual bearing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to hold it with a 9/16, and then I'm going to loosen the handle. So I'm going to set that aside. And as you can see, how much movement we have on that bearing. All right, now that I have that actual bolt off, you can see how much is actually moving even more. And it's not very smooth. So in order to get this bearing out, I had to try to get this snap ring off, and I was going to make sure, I knew how it come out. And so what I did was I was using some cheap snap ring pliers and was trying to push it in and had it held together, and you see how there's a little groove right there. Well, I put just a little bit of pressure trying to, help the snap ring out, and sure enough, it broke it. It broke the cast aluminum. So now I've got to get a whole new housing right here. All right, so if I wouldn't have broken it, like you see, I got the snap ring out, and pulling it out, you can kind of see how this goes together. And it's got two ears right there that fit in here. And so Saddle Tramp had kind of sent me a link for this whole assembly, but now I need a little bit more than that. So we'll see what happens. Let's take a look at our clutches and go from there. All right, so in order to get my clutches out, you got a certain order that they go in. You got a friction ring, and then behind here you have a steel ring, and then you have another friction ring. And it kind of alternates just like that till you get to the fourth one, and then you have what they call a spring ring. And that one is going to look different than the other two. So I'm going to use a pick, and I'm going to barely reach in there and try to, there's one of them. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to lay them down just the way I took them off so I don't get them mixed up. So that, like I said, there's one of the friction rings. And then there's a steel ring. And you kind of see the difference in them. All right, so this is the 4th friction ring. And then right here is the spring ring that I was talking about. And you can kind of see what it looks like. And so between the last friction ring, you have this spring ring and then another friction ring. So as far as what was in the bike previous, I don't really know, if this is OEM or these are actually some aftermarket brand. But these are what was in the bike. Like I said, you had 8 clutch discs. You had this spring ring right here. You had 6 of the steel rings. And then you had this clutch diaphragm spring right here. Well, in your Screamin Eagle kit that you have, that includes everything, you have now 9 clutch discs. You have 8 spring rings. And then you actually have a new clutch diaphragm spring right here. I don't know by looking at it whether, this has more of a kind of a oval to it or not, but this is what was included in the kit, and so this is what I'm going to go back with. Now, what they recommend on clutches is that you actually soak the clutches in new primary fluid for a day or so. I kind of let it sit one day like this, and then I flipped it over and I set it there for another day, and I still got one more I've got to do, and so that's the reason why I'm only going to be able to put 8 of these in here right now, because I got to let that one soak. I just kind of ran out of room. So let me kind of show you kind of on the bike what you actually are doing. All right, so what the book and also the instructions say to do first is it wants you to start with one of your clutches. So the first thing you're going to put in here is, like I said, one of the clutches. And all you do is you just line the teeth with the outside and just slide it all the way in. All right, and as you can see, I've actually coated the new steel ring with primary fluid, and then you kind of put it in next, and you kind of line the inside with this inside grooves. And then you just slide it all the way to the back. And then you keep doing that, alternating between your friction ring and your steel ring till you get all of them in. All right, now that we got all of the clutches and the steel spacers in there, we can start rebuilding the clutch actual portion of it as far as the pressure plate and the actual clutch release mechanism. If you'll remember, whenever I first tore all this apart, Saddle Tramp had told me that he found the actual bearing that was already pre-assembled. And here's a picture of what I was talking about. And it's one of those, as you see, it's already pre-assembled. The bearing is pressed into the holder, and you don't really have to do anything. Just put it back into the pressure plate and go from there. Well, by the time I had got it to order it, it was already sold out. However, I'm not really that concerned because I actually was able to go with Timken bearings as far as the bearing that I needed. And to me, Timken bearings is the world class in bearings. And so here is the part number for the Timken bearing and also the OEM if you'd rather go back with OEM. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to place the bearing into our holder. And what we're going to need to do is kind of press it in. And you see, I've kind of got it kind of started. I don't really have it pressed in very much, but it's kind of even all the way across. And I've got a 15/16 socket turned upside down with a extension into the center of it. And it fits just perfectly around the bearing. So as you see, I've got it pressed in. And it still rolls freely without any problems. Now that we got the bearing into our release plate, we're going to put our screw in there. Now on your screw, maybe I can zoom in right there, there's a little indentation right there that your snap ring is going to go around. So remember that little indentation. When you go to put your screw into your release plate, the back side that's real smooth, you're going to put your screw into that and then just kind of work it around to kind of feed it into the bearing. Just like that, where the threads are facing the little indentation. And then with the snap ring pliers, put your snap ring on there and then slide it down and just barely open it to get it into that groove. All right, and what that snap ring is doing is basically keeping the screw from coming back out of the actual holder. All right, now that we have our release plate built, we can actually put it into our pressure plate. And the way it works is you got two little indentions right here on each side. On your release plate, you also have two little indentions, so you're just going to line those two up and put it in, just like this. Now get your snap ring, the one that is kind of a internal, I guess you could say, snap ring. And once you have it onto your snap ring pliers, just kind of squeeze it together. And make sure that it's in the groove underneath this little plate right here. So now we have our pressure plate completely built. Now that we have it built, you can kind of see how much less it actually moves around than the one before, and it's, you know, pretty smooth as far as turning it. Now that we have our pressure plate built right here, we can go ahead and put our new diaphragm spring on here. And the way you put it on there is you kind of line it up with your holes right here in your pressure plate. That way, when you go to put it on the bike, the fingers of the clutch basket kind of go through here. Now that we have the diaphragm spring and our pressure plate lined up, let's start putting our tool together on it. And we're going to screw this onto our threads for our adjuster. Now that we have our bolt on there, screw all the way down against the actual bearing, put your spring spacer right here in there, because if you'll remember, you can't put that on after you get it on the bike. Put our tool on there that's going to compress against the spring, our washer, and then put our handle on there. All right, with the 9/16, hold your bolt and then compress your spring with your handle. And keep kind of looking to make sure that the diaphragm spring hasn't turned any against the actual pressure plate. All right, once it gets real hard where you can't turn it anymore, we're ready to put it back on the bike. So these are the fingers that I was talking about that the holes in your pressure plate and the diaphragm spring need to line up. I've already kind of coated a little bit of this outside on this side with the pressure plate with some primary fluid so that it kind of isn't dry against your clutch. And what you do is you just line it up with the fingers, and then we'll put our spring spacer in there. And then we'll kind of feed our circlip into the tool and just kind of put one side of the circlip in, and then just kind of work it around, putting it in. Just like that. You just kind of press around just to make sure that it's fully locked in all of the actual grooves and the fingers. So I know my hand was probably in the way trying to get all that on, but you see how much space you have between your finger outside and the actual diaphragm spring. And so there is that spring spacer that I was talking about right there. And then you have the circlip that is kind of going around, and hopefully you can see down there where there's grooves that they kind of snaps in, and it's, you know, all the way around. And like I said, I kind of put this one in and then just kind of worked it around with my fingers and into the groove. And now that I've got it all there in there, you can see it's not coming out. All right, now that we have everything snapped in, I can go ahead and put our 9/16 to hold our bolt, and then we're going to turn our handle to loosen everything up and take our tool apart. All right, and you can still see, you know, it has a little bit of slack in it, but it's not as much as it was. And turning it, I have hardly any at all. So before we put our primary cover back on, I want to go ahead and replace the shifter seal right here. And what I'm going to do to get the old seal out is just use a flathead screwdriver. So you see it just popped out, and I'm going to use a rag just to kind of clean it out a little bit. And then just kind of barely push the new one in. All right, we're ready to put our primary cover on. As far as our gasket right here is concerned, you got two dowel pins. You got one of them right here, and then you got one of them over here on the other side. And so just line your gasket up with those two dowel pins. And now we should be able to put our cover on. So as you put the primary cover on, you're going to make sure that you line your shifter up into the cover first. All right, and then kind of push up on your chain on the inside to get it above the adjuster. And then just barely push it on until you get it to your alignment. And my seal come off, and so I'm going to readjust that. Okay. All right, now we're ready to put our screws in. All right, so starting over here on this one, you got a short one, and then you have a long one right here. Then you have another short one. Then you have a long one right here. Then you have another long one. And then up here you have two short ones. You have another short one back here. A long one back here. And then down here on the bottom you have two short ones. One of them's right there. And then you got another one right down here on the very, very bottom. And then don't forget these two right here. that I don't have a footrest right here, but these two right here are different sizes, and so I'm going to go ahead and put these two in because I don't have a footrest. So the book says to tighten all of your 3/16 Allens from 80 to 110 inch-pounds. So I'm tightening them to 95. All right, let's go ahead and put our clutch cable into our primary, and I got a new O-ring for the clutch cable. So just kind of slide it on there and push it all the way down, and then just guide it into the primary cover, and then try to line it up the best you can. And then with mine, I got a 9/16 that I'm going to use to screw it into the housing. All right, now that we have our clutch cable in there, we can put our coupler in there, and we're going to just slide it in there just like that right there. And then take your clutch release mechanism right here, and you're going to basically just kind of slide it just like that. Okay, and now turn it over, and that notch right there is going to go in that hole just like that. Now take your adjuster nut, and with the long end, face it inward, and then get you a flathead screwdriver that'll go in there and turn it counterclockwise to screw it in. Alright, so the way the book says to actually adjust your clutch is you're going to turn it counterclockwise to tighten it up until you feel resistance, which I feel resistance right there, and then it says to back off a quarter turn. So there's a quarter turn right there. So I already took the inspection cover off right here, but these two bolts right here are actually going to be 5/32 that hold your inspection cover off. So once you get that off, we can start adjusting our primary chain. On your primary chain, it says that the primary chain should be 3/8 to 1/2 inch. And you can see I've got well above that because we loosened it all the way up. So on the very bottom right here is where your adjuster is. And so with a 1/4 inch Allen, we're going to tighten it up to tighten our chain at the top. You can see as I'm turning it, the chain is tightening up at the top. Alright, so I've adjusted my chain a little bit, and hopefully you can see where the top of the chain is at 3 inches. And the 1/2 inch mark is almost with the top of this little oval right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to push up. And you see I'm maybe just a little over 1/2 inch. And I'm going to kind of leave it right there and just see what happens, because on my two sprockets right here inside your cover, I don't want to put undue pressure on there and possibly wear out those splines on the shafts. So let's kind of see what happens. All right, now that we have our primary chain where we want it, let's take our 1/4 inch Allen to hold our adjuster, and then this nut right here that we're going to need to tighten up against our primary cover is going to be a 7/8. Alright, so put our O-ring onto our inspection cover, and then my inspection cover has two different sizes, as you can see right there. So I'm going to need the thinner one up on the top. Once you have it lined up, get one of your screws with the new O-ring, and then thread it in there. Then we'll get our other one, put the new O-ring on there, and then thread it in there. So the book says to tighten these from 84 to 108, so I'm at 96. Now we can put our shifter back on, and unlike mine, hopefully your mark may have stayed, but we'll line them up with the splines and make sure you have your bolt out so it goes all the way on. Once you have it in there all the way, you can put your bolt in there. And then mine was a 3/16. All right, so let's put our drain plug in there so we can fill it up with fluid. And I've got a new O-ring there on the very bottom. So once we get it on there, we'll thread it up. And then with a 3/4 inch wrench, let's tighten it up. All right, so the book says that mine takes 32 ounces or 1 quart of primary fluid. All right, and with our gasket, I'm going to put a little bit of axle grease on it in a couple of places just to kind of help it to hold in your little groove right there when we try to put it on there. Once it's on there, just kind of fit it in your groove. Now that we have our gasket on there, let's put our lock-in nut onto the outside so it doesn't move our adjuster. And you may have to adjust your clutch just a little bit in order to line it up. And I would kind of recommend just a little looser than too tight. So once we get that, we can put our cover back on there, lining the notch with where the clutch cable is, and then we'll put our screws in there. All right, now time to crank it up and see what happens. Alright YouTube, so it's been about 2 weeks since I actually got all the clutches in and kind of did the little small ride here around the yard. But today I was able to actually go on about a 150 mile ride on the Sportster, and the clutches seem to be working like they're supposed to. I did have to go back in and adjust the adjustment screw just a little bit, but you know, it was only like one little flat on your locking plate and it was fine after that. It just seemed like it wasn't fully disengaging, and so it's kind of slipping a little bit as it was going, you know, trying to get speed and everything, but everything seems to be working like it's supposed to. So as you see, it's not really that hard of a process. All you really need is that one special tool, and other than that, everything is your common tools. So if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe down below, and y'all leave me a comment. You know, y'all let me know if y'all have the Screamin Eagle kit and what y'all thoughts are about it. So far I've seemed to like it. I'm just, you know, it's a little different than what it was, but I think I'll get used to it. And you know, share it with some people that may have a clutch problem or clutches are going out and they're wondering what the Screamin Eagle kit, how, you know, in depth it is to change their clutches out and everything. So until the next video, always take the center route, and I'll see y'all then.